The entire cafeteria fell silent the moment the four-star general stepped through the doors. Hundreds of students stopped talking. Teachers froze in place. Parents turned their heads toward the entrance. No one knew why one of the most respected military leaders in the country had suddenly arrived at a small town school in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. But what happened next would leave everyone speechless. Because instead of walking toward the principal, the mayor, or the decorated veterans sitting in the front row, the general marched straight across the room toward a quiet elderly woman sitting completely alone in the back corner. Then, with tears filling his eyes, he stood at attention and saluted her. Before we begin this emotional story, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness if you believe kindness, respect, and second chances can change someone's life forever. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to people around the world. The town of Cedar Hollow was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone. It was peaceful, friendly, and proud of its traditions. Every year, the local high school organized a special Veterans Appreciation Day. Students decorated the gymnasium with flags, patriotic banners, and handmade posters thanking military service members for their sacrifices. This year was supposed to be bigger than ever. Rumors had spread that several high-ranking military officers would attend the event. Students were excited. Teachers worked overtime preparing speeches. Local reporters arrived early. Everyone wanted the day to be perfect. Yet among all the excitement, one person remained almost invisible. Her name was Evelyn Mercer. At 83 years old, Evelyn sat quietly in the last row of folding chairs near the gymnasium wall. Most people assumed she was simply another elderly guest invited by the school. Nobody paid much attention to her. Nobody asked her story. Nobody knew the weight she carried in her heart. Evelyn wore a simple blue dress and an old silver pin attached to her collar. Her gray hair was neatly arranged, and her hands rested gently in her lap. She looked around the crowded room with soft eyes filled with memories. Every banner reminded her of another time. Every flag brought back faces she had never forgotten. For decades, Evelyn had lived quietly in Cedar Hollow. She volunteered at the library. She baked cookies for charity events. She attended church every Sunday. People knew her as a kind old woman. Nothing more. They never realized that long before becoming the quiet grandmother everyone overlooked, Evelyn had once been part of something extraordinary. Years earlier, during a difficult chapter in the nation's history, Evelyn had worked as a military nurse. At a time when opportunities for women were limited and recognition was rare, she served in dangerous conditions far from home. She witnessed fear, heartbreak, courage, and sacrifice. She spent countless nights treating wounded soldiers while enemy attacks echoed in the distance. Many young men survived because she refused to give up on them. Many families got to see their loved ones again because she worked beyond exhaustion. But history rarely remembered people like Evelyn. The heroes in books were often the ones carrying rifles, flying planes, or leading TR-pops into battle. The nurses who held trembling hands in the darkness were forgotten. And Evelyn never complained. She never demanded recognition. She simply carried her memories quietly. As the school ceremony began, students performed songs and read essays about current veterans were invited to stand and be recognized. Several people received applause. The audience cheered enthusiastically. Evelyn smiled politely, but no one called her name. No one knew she belonged among them. One student accidentally bumped into her chair while hurrying toward the stage. The teenager apologized quickly and rushed away without another glance. Evelyn simply smiled. She was used to being overlooked. After all, it had been happening for years. As the event continued, whispers began spreading through the crowd. Something unexpected was happening outside. Several black vehicles had arrived. Security personnel appeared near the entrance. Teachers exchanged confused looks. Parents stood to see what was happening. Then the gymnasium doors opened. A military aide entered first. Behind him came General Nathaniel Rhodes. His chest displayed decades of service. His shoulders carried 4 shining stars. The room immediately erupted into applause. Students stared in amazement. Teachers hurried forward. The principal looked stunned. Nobody had expected someone of his stature to attend. General Rhodes acknowledged the crowd politely but appeared focused on something else. His eyes moved carefully across the room, almost as though he was searching for someone. The applause slowly faded. The gym grew quiet. Then the general began walking. Past the front row. Past local officials. Past community leaders. Past decorated veterans. His determined steps echoed throughout the room. Confusion spread across every face. Where was he going? Who was he looking for? Evelyn looked up, surprised, as the general approached her row. For a brief moment, she wondered if he had mistaken her for someone else. Then their eyes met, and everything changed. The general stopped directly in front of her. The elderly woman slowly rose from her chair. A silence deeper than anything before settled over the gymnasium. Students stopped breathing. Teachers stared. Parents exchanged bewildered glances. General Rhodes straightened his posture. His face reflected profound respect. Then, with absolute precision, he raised his hand and saluted. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's eyes widened. Tears instantly formed. The general held the salute longer than anyone expected. Not out of formality, out of gratitude, out of respect, out of love for someone who had changed his life decades earlier. Many years ago, Nathaniel Rhodes had not been a general. He had been a frightened 19-year-old soldier. During a violent attack overseas, he had suffered severe injuries. The chaos had been overwhelming. Smoke filled the air. Explosions shook the ground. Many believed he would not survive. But one young nurse refused to let him die. That nurse was Evelyn Mercer. For days she stayed beside his bed. She encouraged him when he wanted to give up. She fought for every treatment. She reminded him that his life still mattered. When fear consumed him, she gave him hope. When pain threatened to break him, she gave him strength. And when everyone focused on statistics and survival rates, she saw a human being worth saving. Eventually, Nathaniel recovered. He returned home. He continued serving. Years passed. His career flourished. He became a respected officer. Then a commander. Then a general. Yet through every achievement, he never forgot the woman who had saved him. He spent years trying to locate her. Military records were incomplete. People had moved. Information disappeared. Finding her became nearly impossible. But recently, while researching forgotten military medical personnel for a historical project, he discovered a name. Evelyn Mercer. Cedar Hollow. The realization struck him like lightning. The woman who had changed his future was still alive. The moment he learned about the school's Veterans Appreciation Day, he cleared his schedule and traveled across the country. Not for publicity. Not for headlines. Not for recognition. He came for one reason: to honor the person everyone else had forgotten. As the audience listened to the story, tears appeared throughout the gymnasium. Students who had ignored Evelyn earlier stared at her with new eyes. Teachers felt ashamed they had never asked about her past. Parents wiped tears from their cheeks. For the first time in many years, Evelyn's sacrifices were visible. General Rhodes spoke about courage. But not the courage people expected. He talked about quiet courage. The courage to serve without recognition. The courage to help others without seeking praise. The courage to sacrifice while knowing history might never remember your name. He explained that true heroes often stand far from the spotlight. They work quietly. They serve faithfully. And they change lives in ways nobody fully understands. As he spoke, Evelyn struggled to hold back tears. She remembered the young soldier she once cared for. Back then, she had no idea what his future would become. She had simply done what she believed was right. That was enough. The crowd rose to its feet. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Students clapped until their hands hurt. Teachers cried openly. Veterans saluted. The gymnasium echoed with appreciation. For the first time in decades, Evelyn felt seen. Not because she wanted attention, but because someone remembered. Someone cared. Someone understood. After the ceremony ended, a long line formed beside her chair. Students wanted to thank her. Parents wanted to shake her hand. Veterans wanted to share stories. People who had ignored her for years suddenly realized they had been living beside a remarkable woman. Yet what touched Evelyn most wasn't the applause. It wasn't the attention. It wasn't even the recognition. It was knowing that one life she helped save had gone on to touch thousands of others. The frightened young soldier she once comforted had become a leader who inspired an entire nation. And somehow, in a small way, she had been part of that journey. Weeks later, the school created a scholarship in Evelyn's honor. Students learned about her service. Local newspapers shared her story. The town installed a plaque recognizing her contributions. But the greatest change happened within the community itself. People began paying closer attention to those around them. They started asking questions, listening to stories, showing appreciation. They realized that extraordinary people often live ordinary-looking lives. Sometimes the most remarkable heroes sit quietly in the background while the world rushes past them. Evelyn's story became a reminder that respect should never depend on popularity. Worth should never depend on recognition. And kindness should never depend on whether someone can repay it. Years later, students would still remember the day a four-star general walked into their school. Not because of his rank, not because of his medals, but because of the lesson he taught. A lesson about gratitude, a lesson about humility, a lesson about seeing the value in people others overlook. And every time someone asked General Rhodes about the proudest salute of his career, he always gave the same answer. It wasn't offered to a president. It wasn't given during a military ceremony. It wasn't performed before cameras. It was given to an elderly woman sitting quietly in the back row of a school gymnasium. A woman who saved a life. A woman who asked for nothing in return. A woman who proved that true greatness often wears the face of kindness. Before we end, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness never goes unnoticed." Let's fill the comments with appreciation for the everyday heroes who quietly make the world better. And if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness. Your support helps spread stories that remind us to look beyond appearances, value every person, and never underestimate the impact of a single act of compassion. Because sometimes, the person everyone ignores today may be the very hero who changed someone's life forever. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of gratitude to remind the world what true honor really looks like. Heart.